Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody from wherever you're joining us all around the world. We've got quite a global audience today registered, which is great. So I can still see a few people trickling in. So a bit of housekeeping, I suppose, whilst we wait for the people to grab their drinks. I mean, it's really, really hot in the UK here for once. This is our summer. We've got a week of nice weather, so I've got my drink
You're
ready.
sitting with us, Chris. Amazing. Such
Yeah, yeah, it's like 27 degrees and it's sunny. Like I should have headed to the closest beach, right? For the 1 week a year we get. Um, so, so yeah, a bit of housekeeping. Yes, you will receive a recording. It will be sent to you afterwards, and if not, get in touch with us and we can obviously send it on. It'll be available on demand at haiku.com in the resource center. You'll be able to find that to share it on to anyone who's missed it. Um, Feel free to put all your questions and comments in the Q&A function in the webinar. Me and Marco will try our best to answer anything and everything. Even if you have questions from the previous two sessions, we can use this as a little bit of a wrap up potentially. So, or even any question. If it's a haiku question, we're happy to take it, even if it's not directly related to today's content as well.
football world
Um,
collectorship as well. So anything you can throw out.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know the answer to a lot of things, but I give anything a go. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and yeah, so yeah, please make it as interactive as possible. So for anyone who is maybe new today, so this is part three of our Haiku Tech Bootcamp. Um, so the other two are available on demand already. If you want to go and re-watch myself and Marco doing a wonderful job of explaining those bits and pieces. So today we're talking about always ready. So the last piece of the puzzle is obviously recovery. So, to no surprise, anyone who's been from the last two this week, myself, Chris Rogers, Senior Product Marketing Manager here at HYCU. I look after all of our Nutanix, Dell hybrid cloud products. And I'm delighted to be joined again by Marco. Do you want to do a brief intro to yourself, Marco?
Hello.
Thank you. Very brief.
Hi everyone. My name is Marco. I'm heading our sales engineering and solutions here at Haiku. So pleasure to be here with you, Chris.
Perfect. Thank you, Marco. Marco, so on the few minutes before the webinar, Marco told me that I'm the person who stood between him and the beach. So I apologize. He lives in lovely. You live in Croatia? Croatia?
Yeah.
Yeah, so beautiful part of the world. So I'm desperately sorry, Marco. You have to spend your afternoon with me and not at the beach. So, if anyone who doesn't know Haiku, just a brief overview of us. So we're globally recognized and globally trusted. Nearly 5,000 customers across 78, maybe even 80 different countries now, based on the last couple of quarters, and nearly 450 channel partners as well, and backed by some of the biggest investment firms in the world. You can see. So our product we're talking about today for that offer is Haiku R-Cloud. So it's total protection across your entire data estate. So we're giving you total visibility, total protection, total recovery, and total control. So obviously today we're talking about Nutanix and cyber resilience, but I want to point out some of the other kind of key pieces that we do obviously do. We do the SaaS discovery. So if you're not sure which applications your marketing team or your HR team have gone out and purchased on their credit card, we have a tool called rGraph, which can actually visualize and discover all your SaaS and cloud data as well to help you protect it better. We obviously do backup recovery, compliance and archive, operational recovery, disaster recovery as well, which I'm sure is going to be another topic for another webinar. We might touch on it a little bit today, actually, to a little bit of a degree as well. And then we've got hypervisor and cloud migration again, which we'll probably touch on today, and then cloud mobility and repatriation, which we'll definitely touch on today as well. And you can see across the bottom there, we're giving you total coverage. As I mentioned, we're talking Nutanix today, but we cover, I think, actually more than any other data protection vendor in the world in terms of workload sources. So I think it's up to 86 plus workloads now. I think it's always evolving on from our traditional VMware, Nutanix, Dell, Azure Local or Azure Stack HCI, whatever it might be you want to call it now, through into your hybrid multi-cloud, so to AWS, Azure, GCP, IaaS workloads, and some of those more functional things like EC2 and Lambda and IAM from AWS through into SaaS workloads, the most popular obviously being Microsoft 365, but we actually have the broadest range of SaaS coverage in the marketplace today. So from things like GitHub, GitLab, Box, Jira, iManage, Okta, Entra ID, you name it, we can pretty much protect some of the biggest applications in the world. And then even moving further forward, looking even into the future or even where people are today, AI and ML workloads like Google BigQuery and Redis and Pinecone databases and all those places as well. So not just about Nutanix, we are number one in Nutanix, but also across the spectrum for these super modern workloads as well. So again, what we're talking about today is HYCU R-Shield. That comes in three core pillars for us. The first one, always protected, which was our first session we did. The second one we did last week, which was always observing. And then today's session is going to be on always ready. So for anyone who's not familiar with R-Shield, it's essentially our built-in cyber resilience fabric for our platform. I know that sounds very buzzwordy and it's very marketing, which it is a little bit. But essentially what that means is at the core of everything we do and everything we build into HYCU R Cloud has cyber resilience at its fabric, right? Everything we do. So from every workflow and every way we try and build things, we try and build cyber resilience into those workflows rather than it being a separate bolted on item or a separate SKU or a separate product that you have to purchase. It's essentially, hey, we're building this into the normal places where you would do your normal tasks. So last week you saw we put anomaly detection actually in the policy where you'd back up. So rather than it being an external thing that you turn on and configure completely independently of backups, you configure it in the same place you would configure a backup. So when a backup runs, anomaly detection runs as well. So you can kind of see how we're trying to build that logic around and make it kind of a second nature thing that people do these things rather than it just being a separate item or that's not my team. My team's backup and that's the security department. Actually, data security is everyone's responsibility. Then if we look at this from a visibility point of view, this is what it is. It wraps everything we do and everything we encompass around in R-Shield. So no matter what workload you're protecting, R-Shield flows through that. Obviously, different features and different functions kilobytes potentially because it's just config files and access control lists rather than actual data that's changing. So we do have anomaly detection in different places, but we use different metrics dependent on the application and the use case. So today, as we said, we're going to be covering always ready. So what does that mean? So first of all is validation. So how do we make sure the data's clean? How do we make sure it's working? Obviously, we saw last week how we can kind of scan for malware and do anomaly detection. That's going to give us our kind of proactive scanning and threat hunting inside of our backups. But how do we know the backups are not only clean, but also usable, right? So that's going to be validation. We've got rapid flexible recovery. So how do we actually recover data, which is, all of the last sessions have been kind of building up to, right? There's no point in doing all this work if we can't recover the data. And then one point that always comes up when we're talking cyber is, isolated recovery environments or clean rooms or, kind of how do we avoid attack loops, that type of thing. So we're going to be talking about isolated recovery environments a little bit as well. So if everyone's ready, we're going to dive straight into data validation. So the data validation the old way. And I have lived experience of all of these pain points, which I'm going to put on the screen right now. So the first one would be manually test, right? We get our backups from our system. I used to do this every Friday afternoon, or maybe even around this time, around 3 p.m. before we went home. We'd take a subset of our backups, restore them back in, click through the checklist and go, yep, submit that in the ticket. And then every week, it was the same thing, right? What happened is obviously it's very labor intensive. It took mine and my colleagues 2 hours, from 3 till 5 p.m. on a Friday. Very rigorous, very boring. We only did minimal testing, agreed. We did 5 VMs out of an estate that was over 5,000 VMs large. So that's 1% of our coverage. We did get into habitual issues, right? So you do the same 5 VMs. Occasionally you might mix it up and pick a different VM, but typically we'd use the same 5 VMs because we knew what we were doing. We knew they'd restore okay. And at the end of the day, we wanted to make sure we got out at 5 p.m. So we don't want to make sure anything was going wrong. So, so we got into those human error, human habitual issues, and it just happened, right? And, yes, we logged on a ticket every week, but who was tracking that? No one was tracking the trend. No one was tracking those analysis, right? It was very difficult to do. So that's the manual test, Ray. And then we figured out, hey, why don't we script this, right? We can script it. So we learn how to code in PowerShell a little bit, and we scripted this. So it took half an hour. We sat and waited until it done. We got a report at the end. Great. Completely rigid and inflexible, right? The script was doing the same thing every time we ran it. We then had a script to maintain as well. So when VMware changed their APIs and we updated, we had to update the script and update this, and things got out of date really quickly. Then my colleague who wrote most of it, I can't take the credit, he then left, and then I had to try and figure out how he'd done it and how he'd coded it right. It was controlled from outside of our backup platform, absolutely. So then we had no way of triggering it inside the backup platform. It was something that was completely separate. It was on essentially like a jump or a bastion host that we then connected into. So completely separate, not built in at all. Again, the tribal knowledge transfer. When my colleague left, it was very difficult to replace that and go, how do we build this again? And again, prone to change failure when VMware changed their APIs, when Nutanix changed their APIs, when our backup tool changed their APIs. So we had 3 or 4 or 5 different variables we were trying to plug in, and eventually just, it just never got to the point, so we had to go back to the old way. And then you've kind of got the semi-automated tools that are built into some of the backup vendors. They're very lengthy to set up. So we have to have virtual labs and dedicated compute and dedicated instances and all this type of things. There's very rarely do you get to keep the VM. So if something did fail or something didn't pass your checks, it was a case of, oh, okay, finish the job, and then you have to go back and investigate afterwards. It wasn't a case of, oh, let's finish the job, keep the VM there, and we can on Monday morning we can figure out why it wasn't, or we can log some overtime Friday evening to find out why it wasn't happening. And it was just really complex. Those things are really complex to set up, hard to use. They're not built in. They feel like a bolt-on or an add-on to a story. So here's with the original product, and then we're going to add on this cyber thing, and then we're going to add on validation, and we're going to add on this thing and this thing and this thing. So it just didn't feel part of a cohesive way of doing it. And then if we look at how we do data validation the HYCU way, simple and effective. Hopefully you'll find out throughout the last few sessions that we try to make everything as simple as possible. This is why these boot camps are quite fun, because I think everyone expects like a really super deep technical deep dive, but we don't actually need to go that deep because we kind of hide all the complexity behind the screens, right? So you guys don't need to see much of it. We give you enough access that you can do whatever you need to do, but all the complexity is taken away because everything's policy based and wizard based. So that's the same with validation. So we build everything into a policy. So we can have it 100% scheduled. So it runs on a schedule. So you could run a schedule to test every VM every single day if you really wanted to, right? Or you could test every VM every week or every VM every month, whatever schedule you want to set that up on, you can do. Or you can run on demand. So if you've got a particular change that's happened, I think last week we said about the SQL admin dumping a big disk or doing a big upgrade or something like that. Guess what? You can just do a manual test after the backup is run and see if it's validated okay. Completely customizable. Each workload requires a different check potentially. Right? Some of them are going to need just real basic power on checks, and some are going to need a little bit more. So everything is extensible. So we have essentially a way of triggering scripts. So from the tool, you can then do all your validation. But if there's a certain thing that you want to do, so go in and check the IP, or check this service is running, or check this one little thing, whatever it might be, you could run just a batch file or whatever else to then go and pull that and pull the results, right? And then validate everything. There is no maximums with HYCU. Every backup can be validated if required. So we don't put a minimum or a maximum on how many times you have to do it. It's completely down to the user, completely down to what your requirements are. I think the biggest thing here is, this is going to give you the confidence that your backups can be recovered, but without all the manual grunt work and the effort that's come previously with that. And then when you bolt that onto the previous sessions we've had with the anomaly detection, the malware and scanning and threat hunting that we discussed last week, and then the protection of the platform, this really does give you a bulletproof platform to start recovery. At the point that your backups are working, that they haven't got 99% haven't got malware inside them. There's not been any anomalous activity in that backup, and no one's been in that backup because they've been immutable and the platform's protected. From there, you can have real full confidence that you can recover data without reinfecting or without putting something back into the mix that's going to cause even more damage, right? So this is the idea of data validation. That last key checkpoint to say, yeah, I'm confident this backup is going to work. It's clear from malware, etc., right? So that's data validation. Again, towards the end of the session, Marco is going to take over and we're going to do and demo some of this stuff as well. So if you have any questions, dump them in, but if not, you can wait for Marco to do a demo later on as well. So now we're going to go into flexible recovery. So granular recovery for our Nutanix workload. So this was I wanted to put this on paper just so people could read it for themselves, but this is all relatively, I would say, basic functionality, but things you would expect, but also sometimes are missing from other products in the marketplace. So application-centric recovery. So we build workflows inside of our cloud that are specific for applications. So for instance, databases need different types of recovery than app servers, need different types of recovery to Exchange, etc., etc. And even to the point where I think even on the first session, I think it might have been, we covered NDB a little bit, so Nutanix Database Service. So a SQL database standalone and a SQL database enrolled in NDB need different protection and different workflows to make sure protection and recovery are handled uniquely and in the best way possible. So we've even built it down to that level. So it's not just, oh, it's a database, we handle it like this. It's, oh, it's a SQL database and it's managed by NDB. Therefore, this is the workflow. This is the wizard that you're going to be presented with all these options or not options, if you will, to be able to do. So we've built those really clever workflows. So again, you can't break production by restoring data, which if you restored, for instance, a SQL database over the top of NDB, you're probably going to break your NDB very, very quickly because it hasn't got the logic to figure out what's happening, hasn't got time machine integration, it hasn't got all the things that need to happen. It doesn't understand the platform it's recovering to. It's just doing a dumb restore back into that place, and probably is going to break your production. And then fully granular recovery, so all the way from files, folders, disks, whole VMs, right? Or even bulk VMs. I forgot to put more than one VM on here. We have a bulk recovery tool which can help you recover more than one VM at a time. But typically what we see is most customers doing files, folders, disks, VMs, right? You know, those type of things. Then more disaster recovery is when we do multiple VMs or multiple large scale things, but we have a way of doing that. And the last piece is recovering where you need it. So you can do an in-place recovery, so back to where it came from. You can overwrite the VM. You can download the data locally. You can push the data to a file share. You can create new. All of these options are available for pretty much all of our restore workflows as well. So files, folders for file shares, for instance, you can put them in place or download them or put them to an alternate share. You can download disks to a file share. You can put them back in. Whatever you want to do, essentially, it's fully flexible. So granular, flexible, and fast recovery. And the bit about fast recovery is now what I'm going to cover. So I'm going to cover our instant restore feature. Has anybody got any questions? I haven't seen any come through, so I presume not. But if you do, please let us know, because I know I'm kind of rattling some things off and kind of speaking at you guys, but I want to make sure we get a good time for the demo, because I think that's where everyone wants to see, or everyone wants to see this in action rather than my. I mean, my PowerPoint slides are lovely. They're really, really good, but they're not as good as the guys who have built a nice UI for us to show you through. So instant restore. So I built a bit of a slide here for kind of why instant restore. And I think the instant restore piece is, you know, the average cost of downtime per minute worldwide is over $5,000. So I don't know what that's, 4,000 euros, 3,000 pounds, something like that, maybe, or probably 4,000 pounds the exchange rate today. So you can see why every minute actually counts. So fast restore enables organizations to get their data back in the fastest possible way. And I'll put my hands up and say that when I first joined, I was like, okay, everyone can do this. And then I learned how we do it, and I was like, oh, okay, this is a game changer. This is completely. So what we do at HYCU is where everyone else will keep their backup data either on their own boxes or in some repository. And then when they do their instant restore, and I'm going to do instant restore here, they essentially mount the backup storage to production, thus breaking your air gap for one, if you've got air gaps recovery, because you've now got production data sat at your inside your backup, or sorry, you've got backup data sat in your production. But we'll negate that point. But essentially what it's doing is presenting the storage through and allowing it to run from that storage. But that's likely going to be backup storage, which is going to be slower, harder to do. So yes, the VM could run, but it can't run at production pace or production speeds. So you might get the application back up, but it might even do even more harm, because I get more infuriated at something that's slow and not performing properly than something that's not available, right? Because I go, oh, it's not available, I'll come back. But if it's slow, I keep trying, and my frustration grows, and I get a bad user experience. But actually, what you can do with HYCU is get it back instantly at production grade speeds. So we utilize Nutanix native snapshots, but they are wholly owned and operated by HYCU. So Nutanix don't go in and mess with them. Only if you're really, really, really seasoned Prism user, you'll be able to find them in the Prism UI. They're hidden away and tucked away. And this means that we're restoring data directly back into your production systems. So we're not attaching a backup file and running it off backup storage. We're not doing a migration or anything else like that. We're essentially restoring that data directly back from production grade speed storage directly back onto production compute, storage, networking, etc. And once it's done, there is no need to then do a migration or a storage motion or whatever they call it in Nutanix, a storage vmotion in the VMware world, which could take anything from an hour to 7 hours, 12 days, right? I've had storage vmotions just sat there watching it forever and ever and ever, wishing I'd never started the thing. So I built a quick slide just to kind of explain the workflow for everybody. So just so we understand what's happening here. So this is similar to the one we did last week with the scanning. So we take a VM snapshot, a HYCU owned storage level snapshot using APIs from Nutanix, right? We then utilize those for backup and we put them wherever the hell we want. Data domain, exagrids, cyber vaults, cloud, DDV in the cloud, Wasabi, tape, you name it, we put it wherever we want, right?
Just to,
We
just to make sure that we don't actually put the snapshot there. Right? This sometimes causes confusion. What HYCU is doing obviously is backup, so we get the change blocks from Nutanix and then we offload these change blocks to the storage. So it's not the snapshot itself.
Yeah, yeah. But then essentially that HYCU owns snap is then or when we need to record it back on it, we come back to HYCU, we then reinitiate and we put it straight back from the production storage straight back into production hypervisor. So we don't touch our backup targets, our Vault, our cloud, NFS, NAS, anything else like that. We don't have to touch any of those targets to pull back. Really interesting and great if you're using cloud storage because you keep a copy in the cloud and only recover in the cloud if you really need to, minimizing egress costs as well. So hopefully that kind of gives people an idea of how we do it. So that storage snap sits there, and then we call upon that snap and restore back that way. And as Marco mentioned, we don't use the actual snap for backup. We take the blocks from the snap and do them in incremental. So we're not taking a snap every single time. So great point, Marco. And then we're looking at cross-hypervisor recovery. So how do we recover data if we want to recover it to somewhere alternative to Nutanix? Or if we've got a VMware cluster or an Azure local cluster or a multi-hypervisor strategy, how do I do cross-hypervisor recovery? Well, exactly the same. So you can see here, we pretty much support to or from any of the hypervisors that we have available to us. So we have customers who are running Azure local, Nutanix, and VMware. So, VMware is like their legacy platform. They're moving across to Nutanix and Azure local, and they're using us to migrate workloads, but then also reprotect between the two as well. So cross hypervisor migration is supported as well. Disaster recovery to the cloud, which we're going to come on to in a little bit more detail later on. Lift and shift to cloud or alternative hypervisor is also available. And even if you're running IaaS in the cloud, we can then do cross-regional recovery and cloud repatriation as well. So all these use cases are covered from HYCU. And then we give that mobility piece and that freedom and that kind of flexibility. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. No, I mean, for me, no one saw what the Broadcom were going to do to VMware. I don't think anyone saw that coming, really. Everyone had question marks over what Broadcom were going to do, but no one thought it was going to be as harsh as it actually was. So who knows what's going to happen in the next 3 years or the next 5 years? So it's really good to have a tool that enables you to mobilize your data where you need it and where you want it. So that's migrations, protection before, during, and after, which is really, really important. Not just protecting, migrations don't happen overnight, right? They take time. So if you can protect your data whilst you're migrating it as well, and then post as soon as you land on that platform, even better. And again, no retrofitting. This isn't bolted on. This is purpose built into the platform, and you'll see it from Marco later on. It feels exactly like it should do from HYCU. And then we look at automated recovery of workloads into the cloud. So we call this spin up to cloud. So essentially, fail over, fail back, and if you want to do a migration, is supported also. And these are workflows built into the platform for efficiency. So we try and take all the manual effort away from the user. Essentially we say, hey, where do you want to take this VM to? You tell us the information. So GCP or VMware, or Azure or AWS. You say go, and you give us some details, and we make it and put it up into the cloud, spin it up for you on the network you want. Away you go, type of thing. So we try and take all that kind of a hassle away from you. The biggest thing that I like about this is there's no idle compute costs. So you don't have to have HYCU controller or HYCU VMs or anything else like that sitting in the cloud, consuming costly resources on a 24/7 basis, just in case you want to migrate to the cloud. Only at the time that you decide to do something do we spin up anything, and that's only to do the data transition into the cloud. And then we support all the major public clouds, so GCP, AWS, and Azure are all supported with this functionality as well, which is incredibly important for flexibility. I was on a customer call last week, and they're a Nutanix whole customer. They're looking at NC2 for their DR strategy, but they've also got some GCP and they've got AWS as well. So they've really got this multi-cloud strategy across all these places. So it's really key for them to be able to move and data and workloads between those. And again, the biggest thing here is that customer always retains control. So this isn't a HYCU cloud. This isn't a HYCU tenancy. This isn't a spin up in someone else's environment quickly. This is in your environment, wherever you want to do it in your tenancy. So that's incredibly important, I think. And it's not, HYCU don't own the storage. We don't own the tenancy. We don't own the compute. We don't have our own place that you can spin up to. It's not a DRaaS service. This is purely putting it into the cloud for disaster recovery or whatever, or clean room recovery, whatever you want to do based on your own workloads in your tenancy, in your control at all times. So hopefully my animations work with this. Okay, so we know about how we get our backups. We take our backups and then we put the backup targets into various places, right? And then from there, all we essentially do is contact HYCU and we spill my animation went the wrong way. We essentially take it from the target and we put it into cloud, right? It really is as simple as that. I didn't really have to animate it any more effectively as that, but essentially, those cloud targets that we've got, guess what? We can spin those up in those environments. And it makes sense if you're storing stuff in AWS, you're most likely going to spin your workloads up in AWS, right? If you're storing workloads in Azure as backup targets, you might want to spin your workloads up in Azure, for instance. So it's very simple. It's very, very easy to understand. And then the other way is spin. I want to call it spin down, but it's actually spin up from cloud because spin down sounds like we're taking something down, but we're not essentially. So essentially, it's just the opposite way. So those workloads that are running in cloud, we can then bring them back down to on-premises as well. I think Marco, you had some kind of thoughts on this on the spin down and spin up stuff that you wanted to cover. You look confused, but maybe I thought you told me you did.
I'll show you during the demo, Chris. Now, the point is, during the spin up from cloud, we also even have the ability to actually recognize if a VM was spun up from it. If it actually initially lived on-prem world, it was brought into the cloud because of a hurricane coming in. Several of these scenarios which we had with our customers calling us, "Hey, the hurricane is coming. We need to get this shit." Pardon my French. We need to get this data out into the cloud so we can actually survive the hurricane. And once it's back, we want to bring it back into the on-prem, right? And the beauty is HYCU actually recognize when you bring this data back into the on-prem, it's going to tell you, "Hey, this one actually lived in the on-prem world. We recognize this. Do you want to just restore it with exactly the same, everything it used to have?" Sure, I'm fine. Or if you want to change it, you can, right? We can show this also during the demo, but yeah, this is
Cool.
fully automated as well.
Amazing. Perfectly. And then the last thing I want to cover today is isolated recovery environments, or clean rooms, however you want to call it. So again, really, really basic and really simple. Unfortunately, I haven't got a super complex slide to show you. But essentially, if you lose, access to your on-premises systems, right? Well, you can just reattach HYCU into these places, right? And bring your backup storage, and we can re-index it, rescan it, and then restore it back. So we don't even have to have a Nutanix clean room for a Nutanix production system. You could have a VMware or an Azure local or whatever. You could have a cloud clean room as well. You could bring that into the cloud, so you can attach HYCU into some S3 storage that you've got, right? That we backed up previously, and then restore back into S3 storage. And that's essentially this, right? So essentially, you can have that extensible system, that clean room, that on-demand clean room in the cloud if you want to, without having to needing to run something all the time. Obviously, on previous slides, we have Cyber Vault available with Dell as well. So if you're looking for something like ultra secure and ultra ready to go, the Cyber Vault is a route that you can take. And please speak to your HYCU and your Dell team if that's something of interest to you, because that's going to have that clean room and that isolation, that kind of hardened environment, that gold copy. But if it's just clean room investigation or clean room recovery you're looking for, the cloud might be a perfectly viable option for you as well, right? You can pretty much say that I know that my Azure environment has never been touched because that's actually we're going to dedicate that just for our clean room operations, right? The same attack isn't going to happen on Nutanix. It's likely to happen in Azure, for instance, so we can restore our data up there. So hopefully this session has been interesting for you. So I just want to kind of recap the three sessions really briefly before we jump into demo, because we're half past, so we're on time. So always protected, always observing, and always ready. Those are the three core pillars of HYCU R-Shield. Obviously, we have so much more to offer from just not a Nutanix play, but also from cloud and SaaS and everything else as well. So if you are running these hybrid multi-cloud workloads, which most organizations are, have a look on our website and see all the other places that we protect data and all the other things we can do. There's some cool product tools on there as well that you can kind of click through as well. But obviously, we were talking about Nutanix for these three sessions. So we do really believe that we're bringing a new level of cyber resilience to the Nutanix play, but making it super easy for people to consume as well, without making it just for enterprise customers or just for the top 1% of customers who can afford all these features. Right? We're trying to bring it to every single organization out there who runs Nutanix, right? Not to say that it won't work for enterprise. Of course it will. If it works for an enterprise, it will work all the way down the stack, but just without the hefty boxes and hardware and bolt-ons and SKUs and all those other things you have to, and the army of people you need to manage and control it. We're trying to make it super easy. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more, there's a few things on the screen which I'll leave up because I think we have a couple of questions. So I'll leave this screen up. So the first one is a solution brief. So Nutanix and HYCU. So this is kind of our generalized solution brief. The same with the data sheet next to it on the second one. So this kind of has everything that we do for Nutanix kind of boiled down into a few pages, and the data sheet is one page. Then we have a data sheet. So this is our cyber resilience for Nutanix workload. So again, everything that we've kind of discussed over the last 3 sessions kind of condensed down onto 2 sides of A4. If you are a Nutanix admin or sysadmin or a backup admin or a team leader that runs those types of teams, this is a checklist. So a cyber resilience checklist for the Nutanix environment. And if you are interested or you don't believe what myself or Marco have said for the last 3 weeks, try it for yourself, right? Download it, request a free trial or request a demo, a more in-depth or personalized demo of one of my team, one of Marco's SE teams or the customer success engineers if you're already a customer. Have a look at what this is, what it can do for your organization, and go from there. So I think we might have a couple of questions. So
We had more than a couple. I think.
Oh my God, you've been answering all of them, have you?
Answered a dozen questions. Sorry, Chris.
Oh my God.
I wasn't paying attention much to your demos. Actually,
Oh, there was a
thanks
quiz at the
everybody
end for you, Marco. Okay.
thanks everybody for the questions.
Hope,
We
yeah.
can
Hope,
cover
hope,
a good amount of them in the demo as well, or touch on them
yeah.
as well.
So hopefully everyone can see everyone else's questions in the Q&A. If someone could just put a question in to say, yes, we can see it, so I can confirm that. Otherwise, I'll read a few out because there's some really good questions in there. So I think, are you going to support Nutanix new multi MST for S3 storage? I would guess that we're not probably going to do that because we do our own ways of doing things.
Yeah, I mean, we can coexist with multi-snapshot technology of Nutanix, right?
Yeah,
it's still a snapshotting thing. We aim to do the backup, right? So there is no direct need for integration as such, right?
Yeah. And then Darshan has put, I'm interested to know about the scenario of incremental disk storage, especially during unplanned outage. I'm not quite sure what the question is, to be honest with you. Incremental disk storage during unplanned outage. Are you saying, so if you needed to spin up somewhere, how would you get your how would you make sure you had enough storage capacity on an ongoing basis? I mean, that's the beauty of the cloud, right? It's elastic, that you can just spin up in the cloud and you just consume whatever you need to consume. I'm not really sure if that answers your question, Darshan, or not. Maybe if you can rephrase it, maybe in a different way that I might understand a bit better, me being a non-technical person. So, but yeah, I'll stop sharing for the time being.
Yeah.
Oh, one more question. Oh no.
I think we had really a good amount of questions, which I think makes sense to also cover during the demo itself as well. So you can now monitor the questions, Chris.
I'll monitor them. Whether I can answer or not, it doesn't matter.
You can.
But yeah,
so let's show you also in action. I think everything that Chris was mentioning, which are great topics. But as Darshan also said in the chat and the questions, seeing is believing, or even better, testing is believing. So we do have HYCU hands-on environments and the Learning Center enablement content, which you can definitely go through and click through all of these, including spin-up activities and all of these things in the lab. We can give you actually access to our environments where you can test this out and get familiar with it. So trusting and testing is properly believing.
Absolutely.
So let me log into HYCU, and then we can cover kind of these restore recovery scenarios from HYCU perspective. And I might use a bit of a different flow than what Chris was mentioning, but so we'll start from very basics and then maybe get into more complex scenarios, right? So if we look at HYCU from the very basic functionality, we have snapshot, copy, backup. I could have an archive here as well. So this tells you I have multiple copies of data in different locations, right? I might have something in the cloud as well. As you can see here, one of my copies is definitely in the cloud, because if I have this cloud DR ready flag, or Amazon DR ready, or Azure DR ready, it means that one of my copies of data is actually fully, a chain of backups is fully in the Google Cloud, so I can recover in case of my on-prem environment completely out. I can actually recover inside the public cloud as well. So if we look at now one of the machines, let's find the engineering, which I usually use, and show you a couple of options, right? So let's start with basics. So as we were mentioning, right, you can use HYCU to restore a full virtual machine. And this means you can do an in-place restore, in which case we'll delete the original, restore it in place, keep the same UID, keep everything the same. So really a very valid case, not maybe as widely used, because you need to be sure that your actual machine is, completely useless, because otherwise you're potentially risking restoring all over it, right? So then you have a clone option, which is very powerful option. This one actually hides also the cross hypervisor recoveries, which Chris was mentioning. So you can see here, I can go into Azure Local, I can go into ESXi, I can go to vSphere, and just by selecting this, HYCU is actually going to restore and clone the VM from one hypervisor to another. Or you can go back into the original source as well and clone the machine. And here you can obviously clone it with different options, different networks, different names, and so on and so forth, right?
I think, sorry,
Yep.
Mark, I just want to jump in at that. That's such an incredibly powerful but simple thing. Like, there are whole products built around moving VMs from, VMware to Nutanix and Azure Local and those places, right? There's whole software companies built just for that. And we've literally condensed that down into a drop-down box, right? I think that's so powerful for people to say, how do you simplify something? Or we've simplified someone else's whole product down into a drop-down box for you. And that's how easy we try and make things for everyone. I think that's the really powerful statement to make.
This is what we mean by simplicity, yeah. And it also works for physical, right? So you can have a physical backup, a Linux LVM snapshot, VSS-based snapshot on Windows machines, and again, restore it into hypervisor, into a virtual environment, also by the same simple drop-down, right? So
again, whole company's doing P2V software. We've done that in a drop-down again, right? So, quick question. Darshan has just said, do I need to worry about format or changing image file? No. HYCU hides all of that complexity behind you. So when it gets restored into, let's say, vSphere, it's going to have the MDK files. It's going to look exactly like a vSphere machine was made from scratch. So you guys don't have to worry about any of the formatting, any of that kind of stuff. It's all done for you.
Yeah, exactly. And Chris was also mentioning validation, right? So this is something you can do on the fly. Like here, I can say, hey, I want to just validate this one particular backup and just restore it. What HYCU will do, will restore this machine, test it out, try to shut it down, try to access it, and then delete it if everything's successful. You can have even these validation policies, which then allow you to do this in a bulk over some weekend time or whatever you want, right? And you can even have custom scripts which you can run inside the machine, because more than often it happens, the machine powers on, everything seems good, but OS disk was fine, but actually the data disk is corrupt still, right? So you really want to maybe have your own custom scripts which test the data when it gets restored, and you have your own customization scripts which can be run. HYCU runs this, and then in the end, if everything's successful, if the script reported, hey, success, I'm good, then the VM gets deleted. If not, you can say, hey, keep it afterwards on some validation error, keep it around so I can actually troubleshoot what happened. Right. So this another actually very important impact of this as well is that if you're doing this validation, it helps you with testing. It helps you make sure that the data is sound and fine, right? But it also helps you, if you remember, with HYCU's unique RTO estimations in the policies, right? If you remember our policies from session 1 or 2, where we put in the policy how much time you have to restore the data. So if this is 4 hours, these estimations become that much more accurate by HYCU if you're actually doing this restore. So HYCU is practically, any guess game is removed and you're actually getting true data from your true systems as they happen. And this is the beauty of it, right? Then on top of this, so we talked about full VM recovery, right? You have also now the granularity options. So you don't have to do a full-blown restore of a full VM, right? Why not do it on a disk level as well? So this can happen in different scenarios. For example, your OS disk died. You have two, 3, 4, 5 disks, some really big disks, but just your OS disk got corrupt. So you don't have to restore everything. You just select your OS disk, you go click next, and you restore just the OS disk. It's that simple, right?
The amount of times a Windows update has killed a file server that's 3 TB or something, and you have to try and
Yeah.
restore the whole 3 TB back. How amazing it is just to go, oh, just the OS disk needs to be put back in. It's 40 gig, done.
Or you have a use case where you want to give the DevOps guys every morning a database from a customer environment, or not customer, hopefully, but from your true environment where you're actually testing, or your own environment, so that you can play with it. So you can do, when you restore a disk, right? If you want to do a clone of a disk, you can do that as well. So I'm going to clone the data disk of this machine and clone it into somebody else's machine, so they can actually go in and play with it. You will basically mount this disk to their machine, and then they can play with it. And you can do this automatically. On every morning they get a new fresh amount of data, fresh disk to play with. So cloning, restoring, exporting disks, all of this is fully feasible with HYCU with this disk granularity options. And then on top, obviously, is something you will mostly use, or if you look at the averages, what actually gets used the most is file level recovery. All the time you delete a single file or folder, and you need to get this one particular back. You can do this. And this means with HYCU, how we do it, there's no agents involved, there's no re-imaging involved. So basically, we're just here mounting the required data from the storage itself. This can be laying in Google or in Amazon, Azure, doesn't matter, right? Wherever it is, we're just able to read the metadata. You can go and search your file, find it, directory, and then restore it back into the virtual machine, or you can restore it into a different machine, keeping all different options, ACLs, renaming, you name it, there's different options there. You can restore it into a different share, you can download it locally. So really abundance of options which are there for a file level recovery as well. And when it comes to file level recovery, it's not only on the VM, obviously. You can do it also on the shares, right? So if you have your Nutanix files backed up, or your Nutanix objects backed up as well, these are all fully cataloged, and you can just select a single file again, or a folder, and say, hey, I wanna restore just this particular set of data. And again, you have the same set of options where you can download it or restore it into a different file share, even between different platforms and so on. So again, even with S3 objects, the same things apply. So keeping ACLs, object tags, metadata, all of these things. So this covers kind of, let's say, I would say the basic, kind of functionality: file level recovery, granular recovery of the disks, full VM recovery, cloning, these kind of things. But then things come interesting when you talk about applications. Why? Because you needed this to be application consistent. And we talked about how we achieve application consistent backups. What's interesting is we can also achieve proper restores of the database. I think we did discuss this, but briefly, we have the option to granularly recover single database into a point in time, because we take care of the logs, truncation, we take care of everything. We make sure to identify availability groups if you have these in SQL, in Exchange as well, and so on, right? This is Oracle, you want to do a table space recovery. So all of this is baked into the product, again, without any agents which we make you install or manage in any of these systems, right? And now imagine that you want to do application consistent restore or spin up into the public cloud, right? This is usually a hard task, even if you have some tools which actually support restores into the public cloud. When you talk to them about databases and make sure it's application consistent, then it's a whole different ballgame, right? With HYCU, the spin up to cloud option, which is available, as you can see here on the application view, same as on the VM view, allows you to do this and spin up a VM into any of the public cloud, into government clouds as well, Azure or AWS as well. With HYCU doing all the heavy lifting of transferring or moving the disk types and converting the image types and so on, so that we can power on this machine natively in the public cloud. And I'll show you how this looks like so that you get a feel for it. Basically, you have to connect your HYCU with a cloud account which you have in your, let's say, your Google Cloud, your Google project, right? Your Amazon Azure services principals and so on. Uh, you will we will inside discover all the projects which you gave us permission for, and then you can say, hey, I want to restore this into this particular region, into this zone. And what we will do is we will then check what is feasible and what is not, and give you these options in the public cloud. So we'll tell you, hey, this machine in particular, hey, first of all, you can't have capital letters, so make sure you have lower letters. Otherwise, this will not power on. Then based on the core and memory of your machine, we will give you options. So we will read these options from the region, from the cloud where you're in. We'll read all the options which you have for that particular selection and allow you to say, hey, I want to use this particular machine type. This is important because it's impossible to change this later, or very hard to change this later in the public cloud. So you get this control over the cost, over the type of the machine from the get-go. You get to choose the network which you configure there. And then when you click spin up, the magic happens, right? This is where HYCU does all the conversions, everything, and you're able to power on the machine in the public cloud. This power up. All right, let me stop here. So this is the kind of the power on machine, right, in the public cloud. So we'll move it there. Even if you had, let's say, if you had data in the public cloud already, or let's put it like this, you have two scenarios, right? One is, we discussed it already, hurricane coming in. We need to do a spin up fast. You can do this, right? You had your storage somewhere local. You want to do it very fast. We'll copy the data into the cloud and we'll get it done for you, spin it up in the cloud. The other option is you prepared for the DR scenario. In that case, you already had your backup in the public cloud. You already had an archive kept there, or a secondary copy kept in the public cloud. You had that Google Cloud Ready or Amazon Azure Cloud Ready flag from HYCU, which I showed you before. In that case, what you can do is use that data, which is already there in the cloud, and power it on from that. And even if your on-prem is completely down, you can still power on a temporary HYCU, a DR HYCU controller, which is going to synchronize with that target which you already have, and power on the machine in the public cloud, right? So it's not only a migration kind of a scenario or ad hoc restore scenario, it's also a planned, very cost-effective disaster recovery scenario, because you don't have to have anything in the cloud. You just power it on when you need it. You just keep the data there and you're safe. So if you're missing a secondary data center, if cost is off, obviously it takes a bit longer. It's not going to be an instant power on instant recovery, but that's not the point. This is just a point of giving you disaster recovery capability in a very cost-effective way in the public cloud. And as mentioned, once we have to go back, you can do that as well. So you can continue protecting this data with our service, which we run in the public cloud, where we can back up any of the public clouds infrastructure into any of the other public clouds. So really flexibility from the multi-cloud perspective. This merits a whole nother webinar, right? What we can do in the cloud. But what I wanted to show you briefly now is, for the end, is also spin up from cloud, as we call it. So in that case, what you're able to do is really just say, hey, I want to spin it up from any of the public clouds where you had your data, right? You want to say, or let me put it like this. I want to use this user, this particular account. And now you can say, hey, I want to restore this particular machine. And it's going to list all the backups of it, which I had done with my service, which HYCU service, which operates in the cloud. I say, hey, I want to go back into Saturday, or really, usually I want to go back into the yesterday as soon as possible. And then, as I mentioned, right, you're now able to restore it back into HV. So I want to restore it into my container, for example. And as I mentioned before, right, you have even this option where we recognize that this machine was actually brought from the on-prem world. This one wasn't born in the cloud. So we tell you, hey, just keep original. So if it had a CD on, it's going to have a CD back on, right? So we really make sure it's kept exactly the same as it was. If not, you have full control again to say, hey, I want this particular network, these CPUs, this amount of memory, do you want to power it on or not, and so on. And again, spin up will do the magic of copying the data over into the on-prem, converting all the images, and power it on in your HV, VMware, whichever environment it is, right? Chris, did I forget any of the many recovery scenarios which we have in the product?
No, I think you've covered the vast majority of them. We've got loads and loads of questions, and I thought actually
Right.
we've got loads, so I'm gonna throw them to you.
All right.
From all the various things we've already covered. So, um, So a couple, one here. So I think this is with cross hypervisor in mind. So going to and from Nutanix and VMware. So how do we deal with things like VirtIO and Nutanix guest tools?
Great question. So we are not going to be injecting these, not yet anyway. So what is required or a prerequisite for the customers is that if you're aware of this scenario and this scenario is of interest to you, then if you're going, for example, from VMware into Nutanix, you want to get the VirtIO drivers installed on the machine and have them sitting there and have them backed up by HYCU so that we can instantly, use it for the restore into another hypervisor. That being said, even if you forgot to do it, there are ways to circumvent this, but it's simpler, much more effective if you plan for it and you actually do it beforehand. Right?
Perfect. And next question is there a batch mechanism that would allow for multiple machines to be cloned from one hypervisor to another? So let's say 5, 10, or 50 at a time.
Yes, we have a separate tool which is actually built on top of our APIs, which covers all sorts of this type of automation where you can select 5, 10, 15 of these machines and then say restore into or spin up into another public cloud. You can group them also in something we call DR plans. I would love to show you, but I'm not on VPN. So basically you can group them into DR plans, and then you can have DR plan tier 1. So if anything goes wrong, you need to do a DR, you just go and load this plan and click one button, and then that goes and restores everything. And I think there was before a question which I answered, which was kind of how does this, do we have any experience from RTO perspective and these DR bulk restores from actual world case, live case with the customer. So I'll talk about the latest one, which I had with a big bank in Europe, who actually decided to really test a full-blown disaster recovery scenario. So meaning their whole Nutanix is over and out, all over the place, right? And what they did was actually deploy, they have now a procedure fully tested every month, a procedure where they deploy a fresh Nutanix, completely new environment. They deploy HYCU in it, they import all the backup targets into HYCU, and then they trigger through scripting, through our DR tool or their own scripting, they actually trigger all of the restores of tier 1, tier 2 applications and so on in some meaningful fashion order. And it was an amazing experience for them because they learned so many different interactions between these machines, which they thought they didn't have, number one. And number two, what they told me, they were running 120 restores in parallel from HYCU. Everything was just, they saturated completely their network. There was no bottlenecks on HYCU. It was really an amazing, in a couple of hours, they were done with most of the machines apart from the huge ones, which they, kept restoring for a couple of more hours. But it's an amazing experience, which they are sharing also around in the Nutanix community, because it's extremely valuable to do these things and really test it, right? Because the amount of things you learn from it, just learning this on the fly in case of real disaster is very stressful. Let's put it like this.
Absolutely. Right, a few more questions. Let's try and burn through a few more. So HYCU runs in a single VM appliance, correct? You learned from last week or the week before. Absolutely. So what happens if the entire host blows up and you have to rebuild? Is this an easy process to get HYCU back up and running so that you can restart the VM restore process quickly? Kind of goes back to what you just said, right? Like, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. You can deploy a new fresh HYCU in the cloud. If your data is in the cloud, you can deploy it in the cloud. If it's on-prem, you deploy it on-prem, you just do it. You can even have a HYCU which is kind of on standby as well, right? So you can have a DR HYCU sitting there in the cloud or on a different data center, just synchronizing with the targets constantly. So in case of disaster, you already have a copy of HYCU, already synchronized, already aware of all the backups, ready to just start restoring in case of disaster. So that's also an option.
Yeah, and you can actually have HYCU backup HYCU as well, which sounds completely stupid. But so if something breaks, you can obviously then restore it.
Yeah, you have HYCU as well backing up itself. So
yeah. So we've answered that one. We have a question about documentation. So someone's saying, do you have the documentation updated for restoring to AWS or Azure? They've set this up and the docs were a little bit lacking or created as we deployed. So we can feed that back to our tech doc team, make sure that we are fully up to date. Absolutely.
There are some more improvements on that front actually happening with the new release as well. So.
Perfect. Someone's asked about troubleshooting. It's all configured and planned and failed. What should we do? Well, we have a 24/7 support team. You also, as a HYCU customer, get a dedicated customer success engineer. So if this is not a real life event and you have to figure out what the problem is right this second, you can go to your customer success team as well and kind of go, hey, I'm trying to achieve this goal. Can you help me like make sure I've set it up correctly or things, make sure dependencies are set up right? Like we don't just have a support team at HYCU, we have customer success engineers which will help you achieve your goals as well, which is super important.
And the messages as well, from jobs perspective, something's failing, what's failing, why is it failing, what's happening, right? It
Yeah.
should be able to tell you also there. As an anecdote, I had one really, really very deep customer going in. It was a Navy customer who wanted to make sure that a captain of a ship who has zero IT experience can actually use HYCU to troubleshoot without any internet and find a way to restore things, if something went wrong. So it was an interesting use case they had, and really they tested a lot of HYCU and breaking it and how to break it and how does the error look like. So it was a good experience, which also helped us make this even better, right?
Absolutely. So someone's saying they would like to see videos on the DR recoveries you mentioned. So yeah, that's my job. We have got quite a lot of videos that Marco has recorded recently. So we're just in the process of kind of like polishing them up and getting those out. But yeah, we're hopefully going to have loads more videos and also on demand kind of product tours that you'll be able to like click through and then you'll be hotspots and things. You'll be able to do all of this stuff. So all coming. So
Or
that's
through the
something.
hands-on labs as well, you can
Yeah,
experience
hands-on lab. That's a great through our learning
experience
center.
yourself. You have the
Absolutely.
spin up as well.
So that, yeah, absolutely. All the scenarios we've covered. So someone's mentioned about the licensing. So how does it work? So I can probably take this one. I'd probably know it just about. So we've got various different ways of licensing Nutanix, right? The simplest way, if you're interested in all of the, you're potentially moving VMs across hypervisor and into cloud, is on a per VM license, right? So per VM for your virtual machines, if you're backing up things like volume groups, um, files and objects, that would be done on a per terabyte on a capacity because there's no VMs that we're backing up. So that would be a very simple way of doing it. If you are doing everything on Nutanix and you've got, and you're not moving off of Nutanix, you can license it on a per core basis as well. All the features that we've talked about today and all the previous sessions, so the scanning and everything, are all included in our premium license. So there's no additional SKUs for that, the DR piece that we were talking about, no additional SKUs for scanning, no additional SKUs for NDB or anything else. So that all comes as part of our premium license. So,
This
you
one
can,
can also be per core, so that can also be per core.
yes, you can do premium per core as well. Exactly that. So everything
It's
you
per
can, you
core or
can,
per VM, and then we can
yeah.
work with sales teams and partners to figure out what's the best for a particular scenario.
Yep. And then, so to clarify, spin up from cloud is the same workflow as recovering a VM on-prem from a cloud backup. Uh, yes and no, right? So you can do spin up to cloud even if there isn't a cloud backup, correct? Because we can migrate the data. But if you already have a cloud, if you already have data in the cloud already, then we can utilize that as well. So it's kind of yes and no. Yes, if you've already got it up there, we can just activate the data that's already up there. If you haven't and you still need to do it, we can still do it by migrating the data up for you. So both is essentially there. Um, I think that is all the questions. Darshan, you mentioned there's only articles to help my team members go through the scenario, so I'm not 100% sure what scenario. I think it might be related to if you lost the HYCU controller, what do you do? We probably do have articles on that about rebuilding in our help center, in our support center, I would guess as well. So just look there, and if not, obviously get in touch with if you're a customer, get in touch with your account team, and they'll be able to point you in that direction with your customer success engineers as well. So. Um, we've got maybe literally one more minute. Look at that for timing. Hey, one perfect. Yeah, please do the hands-on labs if you haven't. I knew this question might come up, Marco. The last question we've got for today. Is there a way of pulling legacy data from another backup vendor?
The what I like to say is backup is like a marriage, so it's very hard to break up a marriage. There's
Yeah.
kids left behind and so on, so it's hard to take so many kids. But it's possible, and the only way to do it is, every backup writes in its own proprietary format. So the only actual way to do it is to do a restore, and then of each of these restore points, and then re-back it up with HYCU. That's something we did in the past. It's not a fast job, but it's doable. It depends on the.
Yeah. Yeah, most customers will either do that and just keep like maybe their yearlies or something that they really need for compliance reasons, or they would kind of keep a small footprint of the previous one, like just the smallest thing they possibly can, just in case they need to restore in the future. But yeah, typically those are the two options. But yes, I agree. The industry standard would be lovely, but unfortunately,
USB would be nice.
compare
But the thing
yeah,
is, this is because of the way how we write. Every backup tries to write in a,
yeah, and they'll have their own unique ways of doing it, and their own IP and everything else like that. So, but if that is a concern, obviously get in touch with your sales and account team, and we can work with you and work through requirements to see what the best way of adopting that and go from there. But I want to thank you. I think that may break the record for the amount of questions that I've had in a HYCU webinar before. So 34 questions, amazing guys. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for your engagement. It makes it much more interesting for myself and Marco to talk about the things that you guys want to talk about and answer your questions. If you've enjoyed this format, hopefully you guys have. We might carry on after the summer break and kind of do some more boot camps and things. It seems to have gone down really well, and we've got great engagement. So I'm keeping an eye out for the next lot of invites maybe in the future that are coming. But yeah, thank you very much for your input, and thank you, Marco. You're now free to go to the beach.
Off I am.
And
Thanks, Chris.
thanks everyone,
Thanks,
and
everybody.
we'll see you on the next one. Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.